Zen approach, which is to be there at the moment. And there's a wonderful statement of Raymond Panikar, which is a critique of this Western approach. He says, don't just do something, stand there. There's a need for us also to engage one another on the deepest level of our attachments, to show the genuine respect and to be enriched by one another.
Thank you so much for that. Before I ask the next question, as our audience can see now, we are showing videos at the Luitpold Park where the Ring for Peace ceremony will happen, and later we'll be going there and show you the ceremony itself. Rabbi Rosen, we now have talked about multi-religious collaboration in this conference. May we ask, how did multi-religious collaboration make a difference in the work that you do?
Oh, I could go on for a long time about that. My story began as a very, very young rabbi in South Africa before I was expelled by the apartheid regime. And I came to interreligious engagement out of a commitment to social justice. I wanted not only to be engaged in doing something to combat the iniquities of apartheid, of racial separation, but I also wanted my community to be seen to be engaged in that. And one of the few ways you could do that at the time without immediately being thrown into jail or kicked out of the country was through religion. So I came to interreligious engagement through a commitment to social justice. But as I came into it, I discovered two very important things. First of all, I discovered how ignorant these other people were about me. These were religious leaders. These were representative communities. And I said, well, certainly Christians and Muslims whose tradition is rooted within my tradition, they must know about me. And I discovered they were amazingly ignorant and had all kinds of stereotypes and misunderstandings. But at the same time, I discovered something else, and that was I was pretty ignorant about them too. And I had all misconceptions, and if I want to be understood, I need to understand. And therefore, that brought me into an area which I saw not only how important it was, but also how enriched I was by it. And we cannot understand our human family if we are not engaged. That is a wisdom that comes especially from Islam. The important statement, I think it's the 49th chapter, verse 13, Lit arafu, I've created you from a single man and woman, made you into peoples and nations so that you may know one another. Why is it important to know one another? Because we cannot genuinely respect one another and build a society on peace if we are ignorant about one another.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Rabbi Rosen. This is beautifully said, actually. And I distinctly remember this passage from Quran because I was citing it many times in my talks with young people to, just tell them that it's important that we know each other.
Right.
And in a continuously secularized world that we live in, actually, what do you think about the future of the multi-religious and interreligious work?
Well, I'm not sure how secular seculars really are, or, on the other hand, how religious are necessarily. Very often, as a great Jewish man by the name of Jesus of Nazareth said, more or less, where God's name is on the lips, he's not necessarily in the heart, and where he's in the heart, he's not necessarily on the lips. I think within what's called secular Western society, the move today, as I was saying earlier in the day, with regards to environmental and ecological issues, and towards the question of animal rights, and to the question of diet and responsible diet, and to move away from consumption of animal products to a plant-based way of life. This is overwhelmingly coming from young people in predominantly secular countries. And I would say that is a spiritual impetus. It doesn't matter that they're not part of formal institutional religious structures. The formal institutional religious structures need to learn from them. And if formal institutional structures do not appeal to them, then those formal structures do not deserve to survive. So this is a challenge in our time. Secularism should be a healthy challenge for religion, and they should live in a constructive relationship with one another. And the more we can do this from across the world, through this multi-religious engagement, the more we can emphasize those common values that we share. I don't want to reduce us to the lowest common denominator. Particularity is a part of the glory of diversity of creation, as that verse in the Quran itself says. And as any gardener knows, a gardener that's only green is very boring. A garden that's only got monochromatic that diversity is part of the beauty of the cosmos. But the most important values that are for the benefit of humanity are those that religions share. And the more we can emphasize these across denominational and traditional divides, the more we empower them and the more they appeal to young people, even amongst those who define themselves as atheists and agnostics.
Well, you've talked about the work that we still need to do, right? And I've had the honor of working with you in the World Council, and we both know that we have done a lot. But I'm curious, from your perspective, what do you think should we do more in the World Council?
So that's a very good question, Rents. I suppose I should throw it back to you as well, because the younger generation is fresher and therefore has new perspectives that would need to be brought in, and that's why this conference is so important. If you are to ask me, allow me to phrase it a little bit differently, what have you been disappointed in? Mm-hmm. I would say, as you know, I've been disappointed that we haven't been able to take a stand more assertively on certain global ethical issues today, especially relating to the areas of human rights. And part of the reason for that is that we are a global organization, that we have constituents, and we have to take into account the local sensitivities, and this limits us. But that's a full source of frustration.
I agree with you. Well, we both know how frustrated we both are on the topic of that, but I think really it is where we really need to work more on and possibly involve the work of the youth. Amina?
Well, I really enjoyed in your conversation about it, and definitely, as you said, like we work on the international level, but we have to take into the consideration the context, the local ones that we all come from. But I would like to ask you a question. What do you wish these delegates at the conference and participants here, what would you like them to know? Do you have some messages of sorts for them that they should take from generations in dialogue with them home?
I don't know that I have any wisdom that they don't have for themselves. I can only talk a little bit about experience. So the only advantage or liability, whichever you prefer, that I can claim is that I've been around for a little bit longer than they have around the block. And I would say the most important thing is to love what you do, to be excited by what you do, to be inspired by what you do. And if interfaith engagement doesn't inspire you, if it doesn't turn you on, then look for something else. It's not for you. The people I want to be involved in this and the people I want to see lead this need to be people. You were kind enough to talk about my passion. Mm-hmm. I'm very grateful for that compliment. I hope that young people will have just as much passion, if not more passion,
Absolutely.
for that cause, and will take it forward and therefore help contribute to a better world for all.
Wonderful.
Absolutely. Definitely. Friends, do you have any questions for
Well, I've
Rabbi
learned so
Rosen?
much from Rabbi Rosen, both in the work that we do in the World Council and from the sessions that we've had. And I think it's now time for us to move to the Ring for Peace ceremony.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rabbi Rosen, for continuously inspiring us. As I said, it's passionate and inspiring to listen to you. And we are truly honored that you joined us in the studio and shared a little bit of your wisdom. You definitely have wisdom to share. And I also wish that more young people are passionate as you are.
Thank you both very much.
Thank you so much.
So, as you said, Rand, we are now almost ready for the ceremony. But before that, we have a dinner speech that was sent to us by Judge Mohammed Abdel Salam.
Let's watch the video.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الأخوة والأصدقاء الأعزاء، يسعدني مشاركتكم في هذا الحدث الهام الذي يأتي في وقت تعاني فيه البشرية من أزمات متعاقبة مثل أزمة كوفيد-19 وأزمة التغير المناخي وما يتعلق بهذه الأزمات من آثار خطيرة تتعلق بالتعليم والصحة العامة والمناخ العام الذي يعيش فيه الناس. لقد خلق الله الإنسان ليعمر الأرض وينشر فيها العدل والسلام، وحرم عليه أن يؤذي أخيه الإنسان، بل حرم عليه أن يؤذي الحيوان والنبات والجماد، وأوجب عليه الحفاظ على بيئته. وهذا ما أؤمن به كمسلم، بل هذا ما نجده في تعاليم كل الأديان. ولقد جاءت وثيقة الأخوة الإنسانية التي وقعها للعالم الإمام الأكبر الدكتور أحمد الطيب شيخ الأزهر الشريف مع أخيه قداسة البابا فرانسيس بابا الكنيسة الكاثوليكية، لتؤصل لاحترام الاختلاف ولتعزيز قيم التعايش والتسامح والإخاء بين كل الناس، ولتوطد أواصر التعايش بين البشر بغض النظر عن اختلافاتهم الدينية والعرقية واللغوية. وتمكنت هذه الوثيقة بذلك من تفنيد فكرة التناقض الذي حاول البعض خلقه بين تعاليم الدين وبين قبول الآخر، بعد أن صورت الأديان على أنها لا تقبل بالاختلاف وأنها جاءت للقضاء على الآخر، وهو ما يتعارض تماما مع حقيقة الأديان التي لا تحمل في طياتها إلا السلام لكل البشر. ولا بد أن أشكر منظمة أديان من أجل السلام التي تعمل خلال سنوات على تأكيد فكرة احترام الأديان للتعددية والتنوع، وقطعت مشوارا كبيرا في سبيل تعميق هذه الفكرة، فهي تعمل باستمرار على توحيد جهود القادة الدينيين لإبراز القيم الحقيقية للدين، قيم المحبة والسلام والأخوة، وتخلق بنية وأساسا قويا للتعايش في مختلف المجتمعات، وبخاصة المجتمعات الأوروبية، لكون هذه الأخلاق والقيم لا تتعارض أبدا مع مبادئ المجتمعات الأوروبية كالدعوة للحرية وقبول الآخر، وفي ذات الوقت تتفق مع الأديان ولا تتعارض معها، بل تدعو إلى تعزيز دور الدين في حياة الإنسان، وهو الأمر البالغ الأهمية في هذه الأحوال والظروف التي يعيشها العالم. الأخوة والأصدقاء الأعزاء، لا شك أن سعينا لتحقيق التعايش وترسيخ السلام في مجتمعاتنا، خاصة التي تشهد تنوعا، له حلم ليس سهلا، إلا أننا قادرون على تحقيقه بتكاتفنا وعملنا المشترك، بل علينا أن نحققه ولا نتوقف عن كل الجهود التي تؤدي إليه. علينا أن نتشارك ونعمل، فلا يمكن ليد واحدة أن تصفق، ولا يمكن لإنسان واحد أن يعيش آمنا بمعزل عن الآخرين. شكرا جزيلا، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
Test, Mikro. Thank you for the wonderful music, Maestra Zhang Zhang. Thank you. So, hello and welcome everybody here today, connected also virtually throughout the entire world to the Ring for Peace ceremony 2021. My name is Sarah Netschabat. I'm the head of international relations and diversity at Deutsche Welle, DW, and also here because I'm actually an interreligious child. Who would have thought that exactly 2 years ago, in 2019, when we were, or a lot of us standing exactly right here on this place, who would have thought of what lies before us? As Dr. Vinu Aram said yesterday, it's a blessing to be here today. And it's sometimes maybe even better to not know what lies in front of us, because maybe we would have doubted that we can make it. Maybe we would have doubted that we will pull through, but we are here today. So please enjoy this moment. Take a look to greet your neighbor to your right side and to your left side with your eyes, with a gesture, but in any case with a welcoming smile. Smiles that we have missed for so long behind those corona masks. Experience the power of a smile. So before we enter a moment of silence, I want to share one personal thought, because 2020 made me personally realize twice the worth of the human breath, of the living breath of life, and how precious it is. Because on the one hand, corona is a respiratory disease that can take life away. And also, who of us could forget the last words in the streets of Minneapolis by George Floyd, "I can't breathe." Breath is life, and it is fragile. We are fragile, but we are here to connect and to empower each other. So let's take a moment of silence to breathe, to connect to ourselves, the source of life, the universal divine being, the mystery that some of us call God. Close your eyes and just breathe. And also remember those who gave back their lives and their breath during this pandemic time. We are connected in an invisible way, just as peace is invisible. But what is peace? In this first contribution now, we will listen to the power of spoken word poetry. Christine Frischmuth is a poet right here from the heart of Lindau. She has a very fascinating life with a lot of transformational power in it. She studied mechanical engineering, worked for many years in construction, and then founded her own fair fashion company in 2005. And the shop is right here in Lindau. You can visit it in the common next days. She writes poetry and prose. And the poem that she will share with us now in German and in English is called 193 - 1. It is from the lyrical cycle of peace, which she dedicated to Selma Lagerlöf. Selma Lagerlöf was the very first woman to receive the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1909, with a beautiful work for both children and adults. And we have a lot of children here, which shows the power of the intergenerational connection. Welcome to you, children. This poem is an attempt to transport the extraordinary chapel entitled The Great Dance of the Cranes on Kullaberg into our time. It's a chapter that describes how peace among living beings can be possible one day. Welcome, Christine Frischmuth.
Thank you. (193 minus 1). An jenem Punkt fand ich euch tanzend, gepunktet, Wetterpropheten. Vom Felsen gestützt, verwandelt ihr mein Herz in Blau. Am Himmel Vogelwolken. Hinaufsteigen und fortschweben, hinuntersenken und dröhnen. Von oben Dreieckhaken und lange Kurven. 193 Mal trommelt ihr das Glück in die Luft. Nehmt Platz am Tag des Friedens. Hier am Hang vor den Klippen, wo der Tag rot beginnt, brichst du dein Wort mit Peitschenschlägen aus dem Nichts. Du stolperst über deinen Schatten, Linien entzweit. In dunklen Höhlen donnern unsere Tränen und wandern mit dir. Verlorene Heimat. Die Türen schließen mit grünen Ranken, eindeutig in ihrem Gesang. In weißer Gischt stehen glitzernd die Flaggen, Wellenschlag. Das Leuchtturmorchester wartet auf mich. (193 minus 1). It is there I saw you dance, spotted weather prophets. Grounded by a rock, you changed my heart to blue. Clouds of birds define the sky, rising and floating, sinking and droning. From above, triangles, hooks and long curves. 193 times you drum fortune into the air. Have a seat on the day of peace. Here, on the hill above the cliffs, where the day rises in red, you alone break your promise, lashing out of the void. You trip over your shadow, lines divided. In dark caves our tears thunder and haunt you, homeland lost. Green creepers engulf the closing doors, unequivocal in their singing. Amongst the white crown of the sea, the flags rise sparkling. Tenderly the waves roll to shore. The light-hot orchestra awaits me. I'm very honored to be here, and thank you.
Thank you, Christine Frischmuth, for sharing this very personal piece with us. So what is peace? This huge transformational power that we cannot touch, we cannot see, we cannot buy. We for sure cannot put in a definition box. But for sure, we can feel it. And this is what's going to happen now. We will listen to very different personal peace experiences. So I invite Professor Margot Käßmann, grandmother Marie-Josée Rankin Tardif, grandfather Dominic Rankin, and Mrs. Fatima Halal to join me on stage. We will start with the peace experience by Professor Margot Keesman. Probably I don't have to introduce her anymore. Co-president Religions for Peace, former chairperson of the Evangelical Church of Germany. Not only extremely important roles in the Evangelical Church she had, but also rich academic work, book author, and very actively involved in social projects such as the International Children's Aid Organization, Terre des Hommes. Professor Margot Keesman, thank you.
Well, thank you. I was born in Germany in 1958, 13 years after the end of World War II. Luck, grace of God. But during my childhood, it was very clear war is awful, terrible. My parents talked about it, my grandmother, my aunts, and their stories became very obvious for me. All involved lose their dignity in war, the perpetrators as well as the victims. Wives of the so-called enemy are raped by family fathers. Children are shot, burned, starved to death, and their dead bodies are not even buried. Wounded men scream for help they will never find. There is nothing heroic about war. War is only misery, fear, violence. The first time I wrote in my diary was when the Soviet army marched into Prague. Obviously, my parents, who had experienced war, were afraid. 400 kilometers, not so far. Years later, I spent as an exchange student the summer in France. Monsieur Pouvreau, the father of the family, walked with me over the fields and said, "Ton papa et moi, pouf pouf, mais aujourd'hui, la guerre moi non plus." He didn't know German. My French was very limited, but I understood what he wanted to express. What followed were the pictures on our TV of the war in Vietnam, burned children. And when it ended finally in Saigon, when the army conquered Saigon, I was in the USA and I began to read the texts of the Baptist pastor Martin Luther King, Nobel Peace Prize awarded. And he wrote, to Christians, the hardest message Jesus left to us is the sentence, "Love your enemy." And I think that is right until today. As a Christian, I cannot find any justification for violence in the gospel whatsoever. Therefore, I'm a pacifist. In 1948, the churches of the world declared in Amsterdam, according to God's will, war must not be. Neither my Lutheran father nor Roman Catholic Monsieur Pouvreau had ever heard of it, but I think they would have agreed fully. How could it have been possible that Christians killed people of their own faith because political interest declared their brothers and sisters to be their enemies?